A place to promote the growth of Tigres in English through analysis, discussions, interviews, and more. Welcome to the La U Times podcast.
What up, everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of the La U Times podcast. On this Tigres week in Houston, we're celebrating that our club is making an appearance here in the Lone Star State, in the Space City, providing us with excitement coming up with our presentation in the Leagues Cup as we take on Club Puebla, and followed up by Inter Miami at NRG Stadium. Welcome, everybody. Like I mentioned, thank you for coming along our ride and checking us out. And that was Dennis with some production that he's added to our podcast, which is really cool. Really enjoyed the music in our pod. But what's up, fellas? I know we were here recording last night, but we're back. Thank you guys for taking the time. We got a lot to talk about. Hopefully we keep it a lot shorter this time around, but we got a lot of content this week that we want to, tag along, like we mentioned yesterday, in the Tigres week that's happening in Houston. So we wanted to provide some additional content to honor the Tigres week that's going on, like I've mentioned. So, Alfred, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, good, man. I'm glad to be with you guys today.
Vintage. I love it. We're going to be talking about some vintage players, so got it on. Good to see it. Dennis, what's up, my friend?
I kind of understood the assignment, but I don't have like a super vintage jersey that fits me anymore. So this is the most like vintage thing I could find.
That works.
So it works. This episode is unofficially sponsored by the panaderia that I just discovered a couple weeks ago. That's like close to my work. Panaderias Don Goyo. Shout out to them because the empanada, the cajeta that I had today was fantastic.
Shameless plugs, bro. Shameless plugs.
That's what I'm here for.
Love it. Well, we put out a graphic out today. Took a little while to put it together, and just looking at the graphic, putting it out there, and creating it. It was a tough decision, right? We talked about it, about a week or two ago, and coming up with some players. I feel like there's some players that were left out, and the criteria was something that Alfred, you came up with, and and sort of the categories from the bottom tier all the way to the top tier, and really, really cool aspect to provide that. And, once it was created, I was like, man, who do we miss? But it seems like for the most part, we got everybody that needed to be on there. We might have missed one or two. I'm sure that people may have a suggestion or felt like, could have been there, but that's what we're going to talk about this and see if we get any suggestion comments either today as we're recording this, tomorrow, the following days, when you get to listen to it on Apple or Spotify. So let's start there. Bottom tier. What do we call the bottom tier, Alfred? We'll start with the category that you created for them.
Well, these are the players that will remain forever in our hearts. That's the bottom tier, in our hearts. Just players that we may not remember as being extremely significant for the club in terms of titles or other things, but that any fan that's a fan of Tigres is going to remember them well.
Absolutely. So we'll probably start, and you can catch the graphic. Dennis, I don't know if you can help me out with some maybe an assist here. Can we put it on the live as we're doing it? Or if not, you can reference my profile. As you can see, my profile through the little scroller TikTok ticker at the bottom, la_u_times. You'll be able to catch the graphic on my profile, but if not, Dennis will probably figure out a way to get it on here at some point. We'll start from left to right. The first person that we got is Yeah, that's what it looks like. So if you can reference it on my Twitter page, that'd be great. Maybe give it a retweet or and even a retweet to our live that we got going on, so we can get some people to watch this as we're talking about it. But we'll start from left to right at the bottom, like Alfred mentioned, players that are forever in our hearts. First one we got is Chaca Rodriguez. Why is Chaca Rodriguez forever in our hearts?
Well, I think he's a player that stood out. I mean, he came in and replaced. It was a tough position to replace with Piloto Jimenez, who had been part of the four defensive back that had been champions, and he came in and was plugged in right in on Piloto Jimenez, and didn't miss a beat. Throughout pretty much our last decade, he was part of it, and I think I can recall maybe even in the 2020 World Cup match against Bayern, he had a great game. So I feel like he's one of those players that is a little bit under the radar, but he's got the titles, along with the history of Tigres, and he was always there.
And to add on to his accolades, he was a national team player. 2020 was probably his peak. I feel like in terms of level, where he provided the best for us. He was an excellent right back, had a great shot. He was at some point he was an attacking player. He was an attacking mid when he first came out. Came out of, unfortunately, Rayados Fuerzas Básicas, out of their youth system, and then La Volpe, figured out that he was an attacking player, and then at Chiapas he played a little bit of more of an offensive role, and then he was turned into a right back. Where he was able to provide offensive depth as well as defensive presence. So guy that could shoot the ball, guy that had a great touch on the ball, cross the ball, national team player, won some championships at Tigres, and it's probably, a top 3 right back in terms of, players who've been at the club in its history. So, Dennis, anything you would like to add on to Chaca?
Yeah. One of the coolest things about him is that he was kind of a little ahead of his game, as far as like being a more modern fullback with a more like offensive, presence about him. Because really, he wasn't that well known for his defending, especially later on towards his the end of his time here. But offensively, just providing with overlapping runs, crosses into the box. His prowess was really solid. You mentioned the Club World Cup, Alfred, but I also want to shout out just his little run in the bubble in Orlando when we won Coca Champions in 2020. I thought he was excellent in all, I think, 3 of those games that we played against New York, and then I can't remember who the second game was against, and then obviously LAFC. That LAFC game, he was outstanding. I just remember him being so influential and providing a lot of quality in the midst of what was a pretty odd game from us, and ultimately I think he had a hand in the last goal, in Guignac's goal that won the game. So so I will always remember him for that, and I know that he's moved on to other teams, and he's made his way around the league, but he's a Tigre through and through, and he's, like I said, he definitely was a more modern fullback and a very important part of our history, especially our more recent history over the last 5 years.
Added a CONCACAF title with Pachuca to his resume, and Henry Ford in the comments is mentioning that he shut down Ronnie from Palmeiras in the Club World Cup.
I do remember that, yeah.
And he also confirming the assist that he gave Gignac against the win in the win against LAFC. So Chaca Rodriguez, some scrutiny by a lot of the people outside of Nuevo León. They had him on their radar as far as like blaming him a lot of times for the situation that was going on with the national team. And fast forward a few years later, and Mexico's still in a terrible situation. And it's a good joke to throw out there that people would at some point blame Chaca Rodriguez for it, and now are content with the right backs that we have, like Jorge Sanchez running around with his head cut off. So
taking some shots there.
Oh yeah, that's what we're here for. You know the vibes. Moving on, fellas. This guy is one of my favorite players. When I first started watching Tigres in the era after, or when Tuca first took over in the early 2000s, this player came to the club And I remember, back then when free kicks were more common in a game, and in terms of scoring on a free kick. And I remember, if it wasn't his first game, it must have been his first game at home with the club, and he scored a beautiful, beautiful free kick. He was wearing number 18 at the time, Mr. Ireneo Suarez.
I didn't remember that he wore 18. Yeah.
18. When he first came over, he wore number 18. Ireneo Suarez, a Brazilian player who, came from Brazil as an attacking player, more of that attacking mid, number 10 role, but with Tuca slowly turned into that second midfielder in the midfield with, more back and forth. So Tuca added a lot to his game in terms of, being a box-to-box player. And he was great, man. Before, obviously another historical player like Aitan came over, which they formed a formidable duo in the midfield later on. But when he first came over, he took the reins of the team in terms of providing offensive punch and creating, the offensive plays. Ireneo Suarez. I'm not sure if you guys have any more to add on to this player who, for me, was one of my favorites, in the early 2000s.
No, I completely agree with you. The only thing I would add, I mean, in his accolades, it might not be positive, but he was part of the teams that were, unfortunately, second place to Pachuca. But yeah, I mean, he just formed part of that team that, as a Tigres fan growing up, I think that team really left a mark in all of us. It kind of started that wave of new millennial followers for the team. With Ireneo Suarez, with Cookie Silvera, with Walter Gaitan. So, yeah, we all remember him well.
Look at Henry Ford. Henry Ford, thank you so much for providing some feedback as we're recording this. Probably one of the most well-rounded mids in our history, could attack and defend equally well. Another thing to note.
35 goals for our team. So
how many? I'm sorry?
35.
35. So that puts him in a list of, like, at least foreigners of higher scorers for our team. So one of the things also to know, not so much a positive here in terms of what our clubs, but he ended up going to Club America after our stint at Tigres. It was a period of time where America was buying a lot of our players because we were doing some really good scouting there at the time with the Brazilians. Shout out again to Clever Boas, who's made a second appearance on the podcast as a recent. But Ireneo Suarez. Dennis, were you too young to watch Ireneo?
I was. I'm not afraid to admit that. But based off YouTube highlights, because I am a YouTube merchant, a lot of flair. That's what I've really liked about, watching some old tape, is that he had some trickery that he could pull out from time to time, especially offensively. So I like it. Good
Very
player.
similar to Carioca.
Yeah. It's a Brazilian thing, man. That's what it is.
Cool. Well, the next guy on our list, and I wish we had Lou here. Excuse me, Lou, if you're watching this, but you're more on the wiser side. And I don't know much of this guy except my dad used to talk a lot about him, and I'm sure Alfred's father as well. But there's one thing that my dad always used to say: "Sube Pilar, sube, sube Pilar, sube." So the next guy that we have is Pilar Reyes, who was a great goalkeeper for our club and for our country. Alfred, I'm not sure you got any more to add on to this fella, because I wasn't around to watch Tigres at this point, but you might have more stories than my father shared with me.
Well, none of us were around, but yeah, I heard the same thing. It was just, he was a great goalkeeper. I believe he debuted with Tigres at an early age. He was like 21, 22 years old, something like that. Lou, please correct us if we make any mistakes in any of this. But obviously, he was a champion with Tigres back when we got the first two league champions, 78 and 82. So he's very well remembered by some of the elderly fans of Tigres. So.
Absolutely. He played in the World Cup also of 1978. So also a national team player for Mexico. Don't really have a lot to say about this gentleman. So for those of you that are watching and listening to this in the future.
Isn't he in the Anillo de Leyendas already? I think he is.
He might. No, I don't think he is because I think Mateo Bravo was the one that they included. Pilar Reyes doesn't get really talked about in the history of our club. And the Anillo Leyendas, the initiative that Tigres started now 2 years ago, I felt like they not discontinued, but they came to a halt. They didn't really continue with it. It'll be interesting because he is in the ring. Francisco Cruz is mentioning that he is in the ring. So my mistake there. He is in the Ring of Legends, Anillo Leyendas. The flying goalie. Yep, my dad also used to mention that.
I believe the flying goalie was Mateo Bravo. But
was it Mateo Bravo?
Yeah.
I remember the coin phrase, "Sube Pilar, sube."
That's what I was remembering my dad saying.
So we'll continue on this list, but thank you for contributing there, Francisco, to our pod episode. The next fella that we have on the list is another player more on the more mature side. Is this
Abuelo Suara?
El Abuelo Suara. Man, I wish I had my dad around right now so I can get more contribution. I don't know much about him. I'm going to be honest with you. So I just know he was part of the first championships as well. Alfred, I'm not sure you got anything to add there.
I think he's also in the Niño de Leyendas. Obviously a champion. I believe he was only a champion in 82, not in 78. And he's in the top goal scorers for Tigres with 46 goals. One of the things I read about him is that he scored the first hat trick for Tigres. So
nice. He's from San Luis Potosí. Oh wow, he made his debut with Rayados.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. God, I hate that we have some ties there. But a forward, he's one of the few Mexican players who scored 4 goals in a game when he's played for Tigres. So against Atlas de Guadalajara at El Volcán. So good little stat there. We'll continue. I'm sorry again for the older, more wiser, mature people who follow the pod that we can't give you a lot about them.
But we are including him, so we're making sure that
history continues.
And y'all educate us, please.
Absolutely. The next guy that we have in our hearts, as for our club, Francisco Mesa, the Colombian center back. This guy, could have been a lot more, probably higher up in the list if he wasn't injured as much. He was a really good center back. He was athletic. He was good in the air. He was good at marking. Gave probably, I don't know. I mean, it has to be at least top 2, top 3 most important goal in our club history. And, that's in the Final Regia in 2017 when he, off of a quick play corner kick between Dueñas and Carioca crosses the ball, and Francisco Mesa rises in the air and scores against Manos Wangas and put us and assure that championship to secure that 6th championship in our history. So contributions here, fellas, to Francisco Pacho Mesa.
I guess the only thing I'll say is the goal really carries here. He was good when he was on. He was reliable and never really put in a foot wrong until the very end. I do remember his last year being kind of tough for him, not just from an injury perspective, from a performance perspective. But, 2017, just the way that he contributed, that whole Liga run, not even just the final with the goal, speaks volumes. And like you mentioned, that's one of, if not the most important goal in our history, because it's tied to our most important championship. So,
yeah, he's got several championships. He was part of the 2017 championship. He was part of the 2019, and part of the Club World Cup championship as well.
I was really sad when he left. I'll say that I was very sad when he left, just because of that.
And he really, he wasn't a bad player. It's just that he had Hugo Ayala and Juninho in front of him. Like, what can you do?
and then Salcedo came along. So, but he was hurt, man. Like he really didn't stand a chance against his injuries, because if healthy, he could have easily started for our club, and
Oh, yeah.
we could have had a different story here talking about him, probably higher up in the standings as far as the tiers of El Cerro de La Silla historical players. The next guy, I'm really excited to share the next guy. This guy was one of the first few players that I started watching when I became a fan of Tigres when I was 5, 6 years old. From Guadalupe, Nuevo León, where I'm from. Share the same last name as him. I always said that he was my uncle. I'm not really related to him, but El Pastor Lozano probably had better years with Morelia, where he really escalated his level in terms of what he could do. Always had some off the field issues with more specifically with the food, where he probably slowed himself down as far as the talent level that he could have reached. But man, La Melena, running down number 22, great touch on the ball, a scorer, really, part of that, Tigrillos era and Tigres era when, going down to second division, coming back. El Pastor Lozano he holds a special place in my heart and my family's, my dad's, obviously, because we share the same name. So my dad was also really close to the fact that he was played part of our club, and as well as he was from Guadalupe, Nuevo León, where we were from. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add about him, but really big fan of El Pastor Lozano.
So you mentioned his weight, but to me, he was one of those players, kind of like Cuauhtémoc Blanco, or I don't know if you can recall any other players from back then, where it didn't matter, bro. Just his technique, his touch of the ball with his foot, it was great. It was amazing. Yeah, I was also young when I was watching his play. But yeah, I mean, he was a great player. He scored 44 goals for Tigres. And I felt he was a little bit underappreciated, and he left. And yeah, like you said, he had a good run with Morelia. I think he was champion with Morelia, wasn't he?
Was it Alex Fernandez and those guys?
I think so. He could have been.
Quick little stat.
In 2000, yeah, and then runner-up in 2002.
Yeah.
Henry Ford, great comment. Pastor was one of us from the city, grew up playing in the street, and he loves food.
And he's still one of us. That's one of the great things about him. We still see him in the stadium. Everybody loves him in the stadium. He's there with the crowd, and he's always talking good about Tigres. Sad when we lose. He's one of us that made it to the team. That's pretty much what he was.
Can never have too much trompo.
Man, shout out Pastor Lozano, and like you mentioned,
is that why his nickname is Pastor?
I don't know. I really don't know.
That just clicked, bro. Like, I never questioned why his nickname was Pastor.
That'd be.
I'm gonna have to ask my dad.
Yeah, same. The next fella we got is another one of my father's favorite. He was a midfielder who was known to, meter la pata, as people would say. Wasn't afraid of, contact, wasn't afraid of getting red cards, wasn't afraid of getting in people's faces, and, calming the waters and, supporting his and backing up his teammates. A fella that was, played alongside, Tomas Boy in the midfield, and also played for the Mexican national team. And this guy we're talking about is Carlos Munoz, who has always been attached to the history of our club as a player and as a coach, right? He was an assistant to Tuca Ferretti for a while. He also handled the youth development and las fuerzas básicas. He was also like a consultant, when we had Mejia Barón and he was still around. And so a really important player for the 80s and Tigres histories, and, also part of a championship team.
I'm not sure if he was part of the.
Oh, am I lying there? I could be lying.
I think he debuted like after the last championship, but I mean, he was just, he was part of that team like that didn't get any glories, but he was a reference, along with Tomas Boy and any of the, remnants of the last champions. But I could be wrong as well. I mean, that's from what I read. I think he wasn't in that.
I believe you.
And like what, 12 years as a coach, as an assistant, right?
Oh yeah, something like that.
Like
I'm
so
not
like
I'm not even sure, but he might have like he might have like started with Tigres, retired with Tigres, so like his whole career with Tigres.
He was at Atletico Potosino before he came on to Tigres. He came to Tigres in '82 and retired in 1995.
Yeah.
So, um, really good player, and one of the guys that is always remembered in the midfield, and also with the national team. Um, if you look up a little bit on Wikipedia, one of the sentences: Munoz was respected by his peers and feared by his rivals. I believe that. The next guy we have on our list. Who we got next, Dennis?
Oh man, Palmera Rivas.
Oof.
Faves.
El hincha que juegan.
Yes, sir.
Real quick. Let's go back to Henry saying he's pastor because he grew up in Colonia Jardines de la Pastora. That makes sense.
Nice.
So trompo.
No.
Henry Ford coming in the clutch. La Palmera Rivas, a guy that you would think he was from Monterrey, but he's not. He's from Veracruz. Was a guy that was raised through the youth system at Tigres. Had a terrible haircut when he first started. It was
Yeah, he did.
he had long hair and he straightened it, and it was interesting, and to say the least. But a guy that you could always count to, come in, give it his all, get a red when needed or a yellow when needed, fight for his club, and part of numerous championships team, was able to play center back, was able to play left back, and at a certain point also when needed, because he was good in the air as a striker or as a forward. So La Palmera Rivas, what do you guys have to say about him?
He's like vibes wise, he's like Tercero, but like was actually a good player. Like very fun to be around, like, very energetic.
That's an insult to Rivas, man. No.
Hold on. Let me make my point. I'm saying that just from like a vibes perspective, not even from like just pure player, right?
Okay.
Like he's goofy, like he's got a fun personality. Obviously, player wise, different stratospheres. Because Palmera was reliable, super important part of multiple championships, was on the Libertadores team, like was in the beginning of like the Guignac Nahuel era. Like that guy is Tigres, like through and through. Very much perfil Tigre. And just like a cool character, very likable, very well respected. I feel like if he was around now, he would be a social media hit. Like, we always talk about the meme with Tercero and the pizza, right? Like it would be like that,
He would be a lovable player for sure.
Very,
even
very
more.
lovable. Yeah. And he was always like, I never remember a bad game from him, just like on the field. I never remember him, messing up too much or like having like a bad stretch of games or anything like that. Always solid, always consistent, and very lovable. So,
I was gonna Henry just beat me to it. I was gonna say that if it wasn't for him, we don't win that 2016 championship because he gets into that fight. Henry saying he's a player that gave us a spark in the 2016 Apertura finals. So credit for him getting into the fight that night and helping us win the title. 100%.
He beat me to it as well. That was gonna be my comment.
He was good with his both feet too. He was left-footed, but he was also really good with his right foot. So he was a player that Tuca really relied on. As a guy coming off the bench. So really good player.
He had some really important goals against Rayados. I remember, him winning us at least a couple, if not three, clásicos against Rayados with like clutch goals. So he was just always there, coming off the bench and just being, part of the team effort to win. And if I'm not mistaken, so he was part of the 2011 championship as well. Might have not been, like a starter or a player even, but he was part of that team.
Awesome. I have something. I think I should check out the thread, but I'm going to keep it to myself. Moving on to the next part of the graphic that we created here, and our Cerro de la Silla historical players on this Tigres week, and creating more content and honoring our club, being in the Space City in the Lone Star State. What's the next tier, Alfred?
The next tier is the unforgettables. So not just in our heart, but just we will never forget these players.
Absolutely. And I think I'm gonna turn it around this way. We're gonna go in zigzag or snake. Yeah, we're gonna go start from right to left this time. And the first guy we got, and multiple championships, part of that, defense that holds the record in Liga MX for goals allowed. Right back, also a player that started playing more as an offensive player, as an attacking player through the youth system. A player that won the Olympic medal with Mexico in the 2012 Olympics. A player who's also from Monterrey, Nuevo León. And so even adds more, a little bit of a really good feeling of being a historical player. Had different stints with the team. Obviously, he injured himself for a point there, but he was able to, come back a second time and still contribute to the team. And this guy we're talking about, Israel El Piloto Jimenez. What do we got to say about him?
Dennis. Also Nahuel's lover. 2015 final, which that's important too. Like he scored the winning penalty in that crazy. Oh my gosh, I remember that night so vividly. The 2015 final against Pumas. Like I was probably like 14, and I just remember that everything about that game being so chaotic. But yeah, you hit it on the head. Like super important. Like a staple of that super solid back line. Also had Perfil Tigre. Like that whole like defensive crop just all had Perfil Tigre through and through. And can't speak highly enough about him, genuinely. I wish, we still had guys like that, especially in defense. And I think we're getting some of that still, but not to the level that like guys like him brought.
Dude, we're good with right backs at Monterrey. We got Piloto Jimenez, Chaca Rodriguez was we already went over, and now Chuy Garza was on the squad, also from Monterrey. So right back, it's a good spot for Tigres and being from there. So shout out to El Piloto Jimenez.
Yeah, he was, I believe, from Hacienda Los Morales, which was right behind my high school that I went to, Prepa 7 Hacienda Los Morales. So back in the day, just remember, I remember that stat.
Nice. Next guy, Hector Mancilla, a Chilean guy who, we had some Chileans come across our team in the past prior to him, but probably delivered one of the most important goals. Again, we can come up with several lists of the most important goals, but this one, the one that he scored was against Santos in the 2011 championship after a beautiful cross from Jorge Torres Nilo, back when he actually created a lot offensively when he was a lot younger and he was able to push forward. Beautiful cross delivered to Hector Mancilla, who had he hit it off with the Cuatro Fantásticos, who were known to be Danilinho, Damian Alvarez, Lucas Lobos, and him playing up top. Really established a really good era or the beginning of the era of a beautiful style of soccer in Mexico with Tuca Ferretti, where possession was, very important, and it was not as easy as figured out as it became later on in the later part of Tuca's era. So Hector Mancilla, what do we got to say about him?
I'll say this. I remember his goal in that 2011 final as up to that moment, the most important goal for Tigres in my life. Because for all of us who grew up, without seeing Tigres champions and then seeing that as our first championship, that goal right there was really what the relief. It was finally, all the tragedies, all the past tragedies, all the curses, were falling off, and that's what really set off the championship game at the end. So in the middle of the rain, it was freezing cold. Remember hugging my dad. So I will forever remember Hector Mancilla because of that goal.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. Also had a second stint in 2016.
He did.
For a brief little time there. I don't think he did much during that little stint, but we'll always remember his contributions in that 2011 season. And I also remember, the next season we lost to Santos in semifinals, if I remember correctly. And I remember him being one of the more like influential players of that, especially that second leg, like really like fighting um, to try to keep the team alive and trying to get that second goal, and seeing the disappointment that he had after the game. Like I still remember that um, from time to time, and just a cool guy.
Yeah, for sure. Can't hate him when he was an asset to providing a championship or an important championship to our squad. The next fella, Mantegasa, another guy that won the first title with Tigres, one of our uh, more historical players at being part of that historical squad under Carlos Milok. Uruguayan, Garra Charrua. Again, past, not around that era myself, but my father mentioned him a lot. Not sure what else you guys can contribute. Hopefully, Henry Ford has something for us. He's been busy in the chat.
Help us out. Yeah, he scored 34 goals. So he was part of that first championship of '78. And I mean, yeah, just like you said, I mean, he was a very important part of the team back then.
Dennis, you're nothing.
What way before me? Way before me.
Yeah, way before all of us. But nonetheless, Lou from Tigres English definitely made sure that he made the list because very familiar with his game.
Yeah, he fought for him. Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I think I didn't even have him on the list, and he fought for us to put him on the list.
Absolutely. Next guy, oof, offensive fire punch. When he first arrived, I wasn't really sure what he was going to contribute to the squad. He was lean, he was tall. Really wasn't sure like what his strength was. He was coming from Argentina. El Cookie Silvera, one of the most beautiful goals scored at El Volcán. After a few of Gignac's, obviously. Rainy night against Pumas. Ball is played down the line. Mario Ruiz seems like he's not going to be able to get there. And Mario Ruiz finds a way, slides into that ball and crosses mid-level, right about waist, and was able to backheel, in the air on a rainy night off the crossbar into the back of the net. And my God, it was a beautiful goal. His first scoring champion for the club history. Made a wonderful tandem with Walter Gaitan. He was also played with Ireneo Suarez, played with Clever. That Pumpido era where we were flying and being like super offensive. So Andrés El Cookie Silvera.
It's one of those first goals that I remember that was shared on the internet like badly. And this was back in the early days of YouTube. So I know a lot of our viewers maybe may not remember, but back in the times when YouTube wasn't all that big, and it was a lot of just fans just uploading stuff, and that was one of the first goals that I remember just going on YouTube and just watching it over and over again. But yeah, he scored 51 goals with us. He was part of that team along with Gaitan and with Ireneo Suarez. That just it made part of our growing up Tigres fan worthwhile. And I think we all remember him well. We all remember screaming for his goals, and would have wished that he would have just like the other players in that squad would have at least had a championship in one of those runs in 2001, 2003.
Yeah, that's literally what I was going to say, is that he deserved something. Super important. 5th all time, I think, in goal scoring for the club. 5th or 6th. So
somewhere, yeah.
And he left that a little too soon, in my opinion. He still had some gas left in the tank, and I feel like It just, that we were making a transition, and obviously we went to a bad transition, probably the darkest times of our club. And he was just really good. He was good in the air, was good with both feet, a lot of movement, in and out of the box. So he wasn't like a guy that, was just hanging, waiting for the balls or being a poacher. He was able to find ways to contribute on build-ups. So Andres El Coqui Silvera, number 22, historical player and unforgettable in the Cerro de la Silla historical players list. Next
Sixth all
player,
time top scorers.
six all time. Okay. Next player we got is somebody who also contributed to the 2011 championship. A guy that you can count on, going out to party the night before, but probably being the best player on the field in terms of miles ran and pressing and contributing offensively and backtracking. That was probably the first player for me that, as a right winger, was able to be a right wing back, a right back, without having to play the position, because he was a player that was able to backtrack so much and defend. And, at the time when Tuca Ferretti was establishing, again, his possession buildup and, being a two-way player at the time in the early 2010, 2011 era, it was really important, for that style of soccer that was being played then. And it was prominent. Danilinho, number 10 on the right wing, coming from Chiapas. We signed him, contributed to the 2011 championship, had a second stint with the club after. We're in number 20. Just, really cool player to watch. A lot of the players on, that have played for Tigres, I'm talking about Juninho, I'm talking about Uguayala, some of the guys, Lucas Lobos, Damian, and, numerous interviews or chances that they've had to speak, highly of him because what he was able to do on the field. The man never got tired.
He had 1,000 lungs. He was extremely talented. It just made our offense look scary for all the other teams, because we had Damian on the left side, we had Danilino on the right side, just killing it. Danilino says, "What's up, Tuca?"
Yeah, Danilino and Tuca did not get along. Danilino hated Tuca Ferretti.
And it's weird because I mean, for Tuca, he was so important. I mean, he actually played, and it was important in the system of Tuca in making sure that, hey, we were winning up 1-0, and Tuca was sending everybody, putting the Tucamion in the back, and Danilino was part of that, so
he was our Energizer Bunny, a very
Absolutely.
fun Energizer Bunny, and I really liked watching him play.
Yes.
I don't remember him as much as some of those other 2011 players, but now that I've been able to look back on YouTube and relive that 2011 run, fun. That's the word for him, fun.
The next player, one of my favorite players at Tigres, and a guy who probably could have contributed more. Also a player that probably didn't get along well with Tuca. There's a lot of players on that list. But Chilean, holds the record for his national team with the most goals. A guy that, could play as a lone forward, but eventually found a way to also play as a second forward and played behind Gignac, assisting him. Gignac called him the most talented player he's ever played with. We all know that Rafa Sobis was the best partnership, but Edu Vargas was the most skilled player that he played with, and also scored a very important goal for us in the 2017 Final Regia. He was a runner-up in the 2016 championship against in his first season against Chivas, and then obviously a champion in 2019 against Leon. So, what do you guys got to add about Edu Vargas?
It's just unfair. We're about to talk about the next guy too. It's just unfair that we had Gignac, Edu Vargas, and Eder Valencia on the team at the same time. That's an unreal striker trio in the world. That, just the quality, the international pedigree that all three of those guys had, European experience, specifically Valencia and Vargas World Cup contributions. Edu Vargas was still on the Chilean team at this last Copa America. That tells you his longevity is really strong. And oh, what a player, man! 2017, just kind of everywhere. Um, like you mentioned, I wish he could have contributed a little more, and I wish that he would have stuck around longer. But man, like what an electric watch, and I'll never forget that first game where all three of them were together. Um, just how scary that was, and maybe with a more offensive minded coach, maybe they would have had even crazier numbers. But with Edu specifically, like I remember him coming to Monterrey, and like there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype when he came. Not as much as Valencia, I don't feel like, but there was a lot of hype when Vargas came because I think Vargas being so influential with Chile's like big run in the World Cup and Copa America, like people knew him and knew that he was a big name and a big piece of that team. And so there was a lot of like eyes on Tigres when he came over, and that just helped with our brand and our exposure and all that. So, oh man, I wish he was still here, but I know he's still tearing it up, and it makes me happy that he's still tearing it up and that he's aged really well, just like Gignac.
To me, he's arguably like a top four, top five, highest profile players to ever come to Tigres. Along with Ener, along with Gignac, along with Florian Thauvin. And I mean, in the end, he had a great run with us. He scored the goal for the comeback in the Final Regia against Manos Wangas. And one thing that I'll add is that he took Tigres with him. He got a huge tattoo in his back of a tigre. So he will forever be a tigre.
Absolutely. You fast forward there to Ener Valencia, who's the next player on the list. A guy that we landed, Ecuadorians all-time best player, also leading scorer on their national team. Left Tigres and was still tearing it up in the Turkish league in Brazil, playing at a high level, even with his age that he's at now. First season with Tigres, hell of a numbers, incredible numbers. And I'm willing to say this because I know I've said it before. I don't think there was, maybe not stats wise, because I don't know for sure because I have never looked it up. But I can guarantee, based on the things you guys said about Edu Vargas and, what we know of Gignac, that was probably the best offensive players a team could line up in the history of the Liga MX. I don't know if there's anybody that comes close to that. And, somebody who may be older may take me back to the Pumas teams, in the 80s or, whatever, 90s. Some people might say even the America teams. But I just don't think so, man. I think in terms of profile around the globe and, numbers, being the best player for your country with Chile, being the best player for your country with Ecuador, and then the history that Gignac has created at Tigres. I don't know if there's another offensive lineup that could, argue as the better in the history of the Liga MX.
Also important goal for him in that 2017 Clásico Regio Final, scoring the penalty and the beautiful penalty, mind you. Yes, the Panenka in the first leg at home. Another guy that, we all wish he would have stayed a little bit longer. With both of these guys, man, like I wish they would have stayed until after that Club World Cup. Could you imagine having them available on the bench or starting in that game against Bayern Munich in the final? We would have had a better chance, I know we were playing defensively and all that, but just, having that quality, you never know. And I wish
instead of Charlie Gonzalez, 100%.
Don't remind me. I love Eren, man. Like, I know he's got some stuff off the field stuff, and doesn't have the most clean history, character wise and family wise and stuff. But what a player, man! What a player! Electric, fast, skillful. Came from the Premier League at the time, mind you. Like that, I think he was at Everton before he came over to us, and just wasn't getting playing time there. I wish we could have utilized him more on the wing. That way we could have made that work with all three of them more often, because I know that a lot of games only two of them would start, or only Gignac would start, and they would both be on the bench, and they're just, you never got to see all three of them for like long stretches of time. And I wish that he could have been placed out probably on the right wing, because this probably would have fit better, um, and see what happens. But
Yeah.
what a player, man. I miss him. I miss him to death. I miss both of those guys to death. I wish they were still here.
They were both underutilized, and despite that, I mean, Ener Valencia 34 goals, Edu Vargas 42 goals at
Oof.
Tigres, despite the fact that they did not have as many minutes
As they
as
should have.
one would have hoped. And I mean, we've had several comments on here. Francisco Cruz said, you know, he's a viuda. There, you know, these two players, there's viudas everywhere. And Ener might have some hate towards his, you know, final seasons with Tigres. But let's not forget that after he left Tigres, he had
Tore it up.
another great run in Europe. So it's like, I mean, we literally let go of an extremely talented player in Valencia, and we will never forget his Paninka goal.
Absolutely. The next tier. What we got in the next tier?
The next tier are the idols. These are idols at Tigres. And I mean, we can go one by one, but just in general, I mean, all of these players, they're super influential to our culture, basically at Tigres.
100%. And the first one, part of again that, you know, late 90s era where a high flying player, a left winger, could play behind the forward, could play as a lone forward, could play on the right side. Had a really interesting way of celebrating after he scored a goal. Chilean national team player, you know, a guy that stuck it out as well during, you know, not our best years, but also provided some good runs here and there. Claudio El Diablo Núñez.
Yeah. I mean, we can all remember the stadium just singing all together, Diablo, Diablo, after his goals. You know, he was one of my first idols as a kid. You know, he was probably the first player that I wanted to have his number on my jersey. When I was, you know, playing soccer in high school, I wanted to have number 16. That was, and it was basically because of him. And I know that a lot of people, like myself, who just grew up idolizing Diablo in that era where, you know, obviously our team wasn't getting as positive results as one would hope. He was the light. He was the light at the end of the tunnel. And I mean, in the end, you know, he's a big Tigre. You know, he's never left the team. You know, he might have left for a while, but he came back. He's always been present with the team, with the fan. So yeah, forever a fan of Diablo Núñez.
He wore your jersey. He wore this jersey in a special appearance also in the Libertadores.
Yes, he came back. He wore number 7.
Number
He's the
7.
only other player to have worn number 7 besides
Gaitán.
which we'll talk about.
Yeah, Gaitán. So the
Gaitán.
first,
You're
the
right.
first Copa Libertadores that Diablo Núñez was like a reinforcement signing, wore number 7, and then the following season Walter Gaitán wore it.
You're right.
So Diablo, I'm not sure, Dennis, were you too young to watch Diablo Núñez?
Yep, sure was.
You missed out.
Missed out, yeah.
He before, you know, Walter, before Gignac and Lucas Lobos, you could count on a Claudio Núñez goal against Rayados. You can count on some banger goals from out of the box. He had one in that game that didn't count. I don't know if you remember this, Alfred. It was like 3/4 of the field, and he was on the left side of the field, and he just took on players and then cut inside and blasted it past Ricardo Martinez. I think it was the goalie at the time for Rayados.
And it came right off the crossbar, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. It was a long distance shot, and he had several. Man, he was just a really a player that was really skillful with the ball, had a lot of movement, and you know, he got by players. So Diablo Núñez, you know, he's in Houston, you know, with the club, you know, as part of Tigres week. We saw him in at the hospital visit that he took today on social media. So I know that he calls some of the games, or used to at least, on the Tigres stream with Oscar Sanchez, and he resides in Monterrey. So obviously he loves the club, and I'm sure he finds a way to be involved at all times.
Shout out to him. Hopefully he sees this pod and sees that we love him.
Absolutely. The next fellow, you'll be able to contribute here, Dennis. The next fellow, um, most people skill wise would probably say he probably needs to go up a tier, but it's just tough, man. From here on out, it's tough. Who we have on these lists. Rafael da Souza Carioca. The name speaks for itself. I don't need to do any introduction to lead on this conversation. What's your favorite thing about Rafael Carioca, Alfred?
I thought you were gonna go with Dennis.
No, I'll leave Dennis next.
Oh man, I mean Rafa, like I already mentioned earlier, he reminds me so much of Ireneo Suarez, but in his own, I mean he's become that one player that is essential to the team. We throughout this whole year that I've had the opportunity to join you guys in this amazing pod. We've discussed it several times. What are we gonna do when Rafael Carioca is no longer at Tigres? I think he's one of those pieces that is going to be so hard to replace. A striker can be replaced. Obviously, we're never going to have another Guignac, but a striker position can be replaced. A goalie position can be replaced. We already seen Tapia, as a potential replacement for Nahuel Guzman. I don't see anytime soon us finding another Rafael Carioca. Talent-wise, in his position, in the last decade, he's, along with Guido Pizarro, which is another one of our greatest players, he's top 5 of best center midfielders in the Liga MX. And
Yep.
Anybody can argue with me.
Yeah, I don't think many people can come up with a list of other 4 players that he would get kicked out of that list for.
Yeah.
He dictates the pace of our team. I feel like he's a magician in the field or on the field. There's nobody that retains the ball better than him in the league. He's great, man. He's just that joke. He's got that joga bonito. And against Bayern in the Club World Cup, him and Carlos Salcedo and Chaka had great games. But Rafael Carioca looked like he was a Bayern Munich player, just playing for us. So shout out to Rafa. I mean, I could spend a lot of time talking about him, but like I said, the name speaks for itself. Dennis, what you got to contribute here?
The great teams, any team, have midfielders that dictate the tempo, but also are just insane playmakers. Think about Toni Kroos, who just retired, how important he was to Real Madrid all these years. Think about Thiago Alcantara, who not so much at Liverpool recently, but when he was at Bayern Munich and when he was healthy, unreal. That's who he reminds me a lot of. Carioca and Thiago, like very similar. De Bruyne, like how he is for Manchester City at this current moment. You can tell when those guys aren't in those squads, their teams are not as good. And that's the same thing with Carioca. The prime example of that being what happened in the Conca Champions against Columbus. That
Yes.
dumb red card that he got in the Orlando game that we didn't even know was a 2-game suspension.
Yeah.
The midfield just wasn't the same. And that speaks more than enough to the quality of player that he is. He's turned into a great leader recently too, which I've really respected. That the 2023 championship, his leadership, I think, is super, super important. And I just love that he's not like the most vocal. Like he leads by example and he leads with his play. And he's one of my favorite players that I've ever seen, not just at Tigres, but just like ever. Like I just have an affection for midfielders like that, who just have so much like quality, who have the magic touch, who have the ability to, switch plays and to have these crazy passes, and they don't let the game rush them. Like they control everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I talked about Thiago, and that's why I talk about Carioca. Carioca's the guy who's on the back of my jersey, the away jersey from last year, which I plan to wear tomorrow at the game. And I love him to death, and I know that his time may be coming soon, like to an end, and I hope that that's not the case, because genuinely, like you said, Alfred, like how the heck are we going to replace him? There is nobody like him, and maybe he could be higher, but I think just from like a time perspective, if he was here a little bit longer, like if he was in like the 2015 and 16 teams, he'd be, right up there. But
Yeah.
For being able to make it work despite so many like moving parts in midfield, because he was next to Guido for a little bit, and that was a little bit too slow, and now you've got Goriaran and kind of some differences there, time with Vigo and stuff like that. He's always been such a mainstay and speaks to the quality of player that he is, and he's never hurt, which is like awesome. That's like
Good point. We were all worried whenever Guido Pizarro left to Sevilla in 2017, and this player came from Brazil and got signed in his first season, contributed to the championship of the Final Regia, champion in 2019, champion in 2020 with the Club World Cup, champion in 2023. So Rafael da Souza Carioca is an idol at our club. And
again, Brazilians, man, something about them.
Absolutely. Next player. Oof. So much talent. Another player that we probably could have had, wish we could have had him a little earlier. Probably came at the prime of his career at 30 years old. Killed it.
Had accolades.
Yeah, he's up there as one of the most successful foreign players in terms of championships. He's got Liga MX, he's got CONCACAF, he's got Copa Sudamericana with Pachuca, was great at Morelia, where he earned the nickname La Chilindrina, and then became El Enano. One of the most famous things to his resume is he said no to Rayados, and we love it. Didn't want to come play for them, even if they offered him all the money in the world when he was, early in his career at River. Damián El Enano Álvarez arrived in 2010 to change also the history of our club, raised the championship in 2017 in the Final Regia, was part of the 2015 championship, part of the Libertadores run, where he probably should have started because he had started all throughout the Libertadores, and he was South American. He wanted that, but Tuca thought otherwise. But nonetheless, man, Damián Álvarez is, an incredible player. Even in the later part of his career, backing up Aquino on the left wing was incredible. In 15, 20 minutes, and en español te hacía un desmadre. And, no matter how predictable his play was, because it became so predictable, you knew what he was going to do. He was going to cut. But even if he cut, this man was going to fire off a nice cross. And so he formed a beautiful relationship with Lucas Lobos when he first came on. Really good friends there. He's just incredible, man. He's just a super talented player, and we love him. We miss him, and it's definitely one of the idols in the Cerro De La Silla historical players.
Perfil Tigre through and through too. Like loves the club, even still to this day. Like super, like on social media, like
he's very active,
super active, and loves the team, loves the players. That send off moment of 2017 where he's the one lifting the trophy at the BBVA is unforgettable for me. Pure winger. There's something about pure wingers, man, who just they just go at you. They go at defenders. They don't waste time. They're just ready to go, and they try to work their magic. That's not as much of a thing anymore, I don't feel like. I mean, you still see that from time to time with Vinicius Jr. and even Bukayo Saka to some degree. But Damián, what, like you said, what he was doing, but you couldn't stop it, honestly. And just a class guy too.
Yeah, and I think that's why we love Marcelo Flores too, because like you said, I mean, we don't see wingers like that anymore. And I mean, going back to his first years and his first accomplishments, he made that goal that took us into the Libertadores. Without that goal, we would not have had that historical run at Libertadores. And he also had that goal at the first leg against Santos in the 2011 final. So just through and through, he's a historical moment for our team. I was super emotional during, when they showed that in the documentary, him lifting the trophy and all of that. It's just, seeing his tears, it reflects our team, basically,
Yeah, he's one of the players that like I hope he's never forgotten because talent wise and like Dennis said, perfil tigre, it's the love that he currently has for the squad. It was incredible, and it is incredible, and you want more players like him to come to our squad and fall in love with the team. And he talks about it in the docu series that a lot of players that come and go don't realize where they're standing at Tigres, and um, again, we got him a little too late, but incredible player, one of Tuca's favorites. Coached him at Morelia, and obviously coached him at Tigres, but nothing but beautiful things about Damian Alvarez. The next player, the man of the hour, the guy that coached us to an amazing run in a championship in the 6-month period where we didn't think we were going to win anything. We had 3 coaching changes. A guy that stuck it out, being a player with us in the 90s and went down with the club to second division, stuck it out, didn't want to go anywhere. He agreed with some of the other players to stick it out in second division and come back. And the following year they came back, just like, we mentioned Diablo Nunez, at least during my era, watching Diablo and Siboldi was, my first instances of being a Tigres fan. And Robert Dante Siboldi, anywhere, I never really wanted to play goalie, but if I was anything near, trying to dive as a little, chubby kid at the beach, in the water, I would always say his name, Siboldi. And, he was just a player that I loved, leadership, and we got him as a coach, came and rescued us. He's in the middle of a hot mess that I'm sure everybody has followed, but we're not going to spend some time on that. We're going to talk about him as the player and the coach. Henry Ford says, justice for Siboldi. Got that right, my friend. But incredible leader, incredible, player as well, Uruguayan, and, just someone that, means a lot to the club. So I'll tee it off to you guys.
Just an idol. He's an idol. I mean, there's a reason why, in this whole controversy, even though we won't get into it, we believe him. I mean, how can we not? I mean, he's a Tigre through and through. He was there when the team needed him the most back in '96. He could have left. He could have left just like some of the other players that stuck around. And there were some important players that left and did not stick around. He was one of the ones that stuck around. And we're forever grateful, for what he did for us back then, bringing the team back, being part of that team. And then last year, I mean, we have a whole docu-series that pretty much describes the whole run. Is it's the perfect story, of him coming back and him, being the one leading us to that championship. He's an idol through and through. He's a Tigre through and through. And how can we not love him? I mean, if there is anything else negative on the side, I don't want to hear it. As simple as that. I do not want to hear it. I believe this man.
He stepped up when nobody else would. He took charge and wanted to contribute when not many others would, both as a player and as a coach. He sacrificed a lot for our club, our institution, and I didn't, obviously didn't get to see him play. And I've seen some clips here and there, but as you guys have heard me say on previous episodes, like as a coach, being willing to come in very difficult circumstances and provide us, a title and 2 other trophies besides that goes a long way. And obviously, like you guys have mentioned, like getting us back into the first division when, you're never guaranteed to go back straight up ever, like sometimes you go down to the second division and you stay there, He's a big reason why we were able to get back up so quickly and laid the foundation for, the era that we've been in now.
100. Shout out Siboldi. The next fella, a fan favorite as well. True grit on the field. Many nights was bleeding for our club and injured and hit, most of the time because he created the contact, not because he was hit with the contact. A true left back, a guy that was an excellent defender, had great, just great, ability to get up, but also just defend really well. Wasn't the best with his feet offensively, but he did provide the most important cross in the history of our club by securing that cross over to Hector Mancilla after a 29-year drought of a championship. And this next fellow is Jorge Torres Nilo, part of the historic championship and defensive line. Again, where, we have the less goals allowed in league history. A guy that came from Atlas along with Hugo Ayala in 2010 to change the history with Tuca Ferretti and the rest of the players like Damian that we've spoken about. National team player, 2010 national team player with Mexico with Javier Aguirre. Was at the 2014 with Piojo Herrera. Was he at the 2018? I feel like he was at the 2018 as well. No, he missed the cut.
I think the only one that was on 18 from us was Hugo,
and then later on Salcedo.
Sure. Yeah.
But incredible player, man. What do we think about Jorge Torres Nilo?
You forgot the most important attribute about him. Era pelón.
He had some hair at some point. He got a little nice little spiky hair.
A little bit. Nah, dude. What a guy. What a player. As we mentioned with some of these other guys in that back line, just pure grit, pure determination, a chemistry between the four of them that just frankly I don't think has been matched for our club since then, but maybe even in our league, honestly. Just the way that they understood each other and, his progression from, being very defensive to like adding offensive elements to his game and, important crosses, important moments offensively, but still, just a dog defensively, just a dog. He got that dog in him, as the kids would say here. And literally would bleed for us, would bleed for the club. And he bled multiple times and it didn't look pretty. But a warrior.
True that.
Shout out to Mag on Twitter who gave him the nickname El Hacha de Dios, right? God's axe in English. Man, I mean, obviously, we all know that he's very religious. I still remember his, just kneeling down in the championships and praying. Him along with, Carioca and some other players, Chaka as well. But yeah, I mean, he like the comment right there says he bled for us. He left every drop of sweat that he had in him for this club, for this team. Honestly, nothing negative ever to say about him. I don't think anything has ever come out negative from him. And even now, now that he's an ex-player, I think he's had a stint of a little bit of TikTok popularity that we didn't expect out of him. But I mean, he's a great guy. He's loved through and through in the institution in the city. Every now and then he makes appearances, and he's a legend. He's an idol for a team. And yeah, nothing else to say. We love him.
He released a song recently too. He's an artist.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you should connect with him, Dennis.
Maybe.
The next player also from the youth system, not from the Monterrey or Nuevo León State, but a guy that was raised through the ranks of our club and also has scored, some great goals and important goals for us on Christmas Day to tie the game in the 119th minute. A guy that was able to play as the central defensive mid where he started, but also played as a right back, a left back, wherever you wanted to put him or Tuca wanted to put him, he was able to do a good job. Wasn't the most talented on the field, but he had some hustle, and I don't know where it came out with a beautiful, beautiful coin move named La Dueña. El Pollo Jesus Dueñas.
Oh,
I know that Henry Ford apparently has beef with him, and I know that he played at Cruz Azul and he kissed the escudo and probably not ideal there after he left Tigres, but he didn't leave in the best situation either. I feel like he got pushed out as well. He could have been left to ride out his career. Played at Juarez and then played at Cruz Azul, where he scored again the crest of Cruz Azul. And so there's some beef there with the fans, but um, accolades are there. In terms of championships, he was a regular, important player in those lineups, like I mentioned, and part of the most important success in Tigres history. So, what you guys have to say about Jesus Dueñas?
Versatility. That's the word I have for him. You mentioned that like you put him anywhere, in the 6 as an 8, as a left back or a right back. I'm sure he played center back at one point. When I play on FIFA 22, I like to rotate him in various spots. So some games I'll play him next to Carioca. Some games I'll play him at left back, and some games I'll play him at right back, depending on if I'm in season mode or not. Obviously, produced one of our more iconic moments. To be able to be in the right place at the right time and score that goal on Christmas night, after all the emotions and all just the drama and everything about that game being so heated, to be able to provide that, like, really important, really influential. Obviously, the stadium, I remember hearing the roar of the stadium through my TV, just how loud it was when he scored that. And obviously, you knew from there that we were going to win that in the penalty shootout. So kudos to him. Obviously, since he's left, he hasn't been on his best behavior, but for tonight, I'll forgive him.
Yes, I think some of our listeners maybe want him drop down a tier from our tier, but yeah, I mean, El Pollo Dueñas, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the player with the most accolades, because he's got from all the way from 2011 all the way through the 2019. So along with like maybe Hugo Ayala.
I think Hugo Ayala has him beat, because Hugo Ayala gets introduced as with the player with the most championships.
Is he? Okay.
But Jesus Dueñas is up there in terms of games as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a good. I liked him as a player. I can count on him to play well for our club. Wasn't, like I said, the most talented, but you can count on him. Moving on up, the next tier, and getting closer to finishing here. Thank you everybody for tuning in and sticking around. When I first wanted to record this podcast, I was like, 30-minute podcast, we'll be done. But lots of players here, lots of important players, but thanks for sticking out and tuning in and, listening to our boring takes about our club. But next tier, Alfred, what we got?
The incomparables. Okay, these are the players that just, there's no match for them. Okay, above or below the tiers, I mean, these are unique players to our club history, to our culture. They're idols. They're Tigres through and through. And let's go through them.
Absolutely. You foreshadowed that with Hugo Ayala here, the next guy on our list, the guy with the most accolades in terms of honors at our club, high on the list for most games played, most Clásico Regios played. Again, part of that Fantastic Four, let's call it that, Fantastic Four in the defensive line with Juninho, Jorge Torres Nilo, and El Piloto Jimenez. Guy now who is in a role in the front office as a sporting director for the Tigres Femenil side, a number 4, a player who was, a guy that could come out of the back very nicely, elegantly, to provide that build-up that Tuca wanted at the time. A guy who came with Atlas in 2010, and I met him recently at the press conference that they had for Houston here at the Mexican consulate, and I spoke to him, man, like for about 20 minutes, and a really humble guy. He shared a story that he almost went to Cruz Azul, and he just, he said no, and he mentioned that he didn't even know how much he was going to get paid coming to Tigres. He just wanted to come here because he didn't like La Ciudad de Mexico, and I shared, as like, you could have been like Jesus Corona and not won anything. So glad you made it to Tigres. Best slide tackle of all time. Definitely agree with that. Just an elegant player, man. Good in the air important goal in the 2015 Libertadores to bring that momentum back home as we lost that game 2-1, as Edgar is mentioning, and then also the goal to tie against LAFC in the 2020 Club World Cup. Hugo Ayala, fellas, what we got to say about him?
Big game player. Always stepped up in the biggest of games, whether for club or for country, because let's not forget the very important role he played in that famous win in the 2018 World Cup opener against Germany. He was very, very good in that game. But as far as our club goes, Edgar just mentioned that that LAFC goal at a point in that game where we were struggling to really get anything and LAFC was really frustrating us, for him to provide that moment to tie the game up, it kind of felt from there on out that we had control of the game. We just needed one opportunity. And then obviously a few minutes later, Gignac scores the winner, and then we win our first Coca Champions. And that doesn't happen without him. That, like, none of the championships that he was involved in doesn't happen without him. Obviously 2019, that was such a defensive minded team. I mean, that final was ugly. There was one goal throughout that entire series, and big part to play. And his leadership is so important on and off the field, and he exuded that throughout his playing career, and obviously now with what he's doing with Femenil and staying around with the club. Like, the guy loves the team, loves the institution, and is a leader, and hopefully he can continue to provide more leadership in whatever role he serves in the years to come.
Nothing else to add. Just a great player. Honestly, he's one of those example players, just like Torres Nilo. Nothing negative to say ever about him, on or off the field. And yeah, I mean, obviously his accolades speak for himself. And to me, talent wise, he was like our Rafa Marquez. That's who he was to me. He was just very classy defender, very reliable, and was always there.
100. I got a smile on my face because the next player that I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite players of all time.
I'm gonna interrupt you. You snuck him in there in the category with Lucas Lowe.
Man, for the sake of the graphic, I had to move some stuff around, man, and like it just made sense. And I consulted it with somebody. You know who I consulted it? I went to the VAR. I went to Alvaro and he said to switch Walter with Lucas Lobos, and I said I can't do that to Lucas Lobos because he, obviously we'll talk about him, so I don't want to spoil that part. But Walter Nicolás Gaitán Sayavedra. Oof. El Mago, El Divino, El Chueco, the guy that stole El Volcán, memories for so many nights because he was just an excellent player. He did not win a championship, but, prior to, all the success that Tigres had, he was part of, some really important runs as far as, being an important player to our squad. He was just a really good talent. He came from he played at Boca Juniors, he played at Villarreal, and then played at Tigres, all blue and yellow colors. I remember the first game that he played.
Rosario Central too, no?
Rosario Central is I think where he came out of first. So when I first saw him play and I saw him touch the ball, I remember telling my uncle, I was like, that guy's gonna be good. And I was what, maybe 13, 14 years old, and I knew that he was going to be a special talent, and sure was. Just a really class player with the ball. So that's my boy, Walter Gaitán.
Dennis?
Well,
Don't tell me you're too young.
He's too young.
I mean,
Oh, man.
yeah, but YouTube is my friend. Okay. My uncle really speaks highly of him. Has told me a lot,
Look at that.
a lot about him from his days, and yeah, just magic. In the same way that Carioca's magic, like Gatan was magic, and Ooze class, like just different class compared to everybody else on the field that he was ever on. So I wish I would have seen him live in my lifetime. And could you imagine him and Gignac partnering up right now? Mamma mia.
I got this painting done of Gignac, Walter, and Lucas Lobos by a friend. So it's on the canvas, but Cerro La Silla in the background. But the midfield. Oh, Edgar, thank you for bringing it up, my friend. The midfield goal against Morelia.
Yeah.
But Alfred, throw in your 2 cents about him. I know you don't like him very much.
No, come on. No, how can you say that? No. Don't slander me that way. No, not in any way at all. At all. So Walter El Chueco Gaitan, and we're gonna go back. Dennis mentioned being a fan of you too. I'm sure you've seen his slide, his videos of goals. Going back to what I was talking about with Cookie Silvera's goal, back when YouTube was first starting, his top 10 from back when it was Acción TV or something like that from Televisa. His top 10 goals had like the most views that I remember, from back in the day. It was just an amazing set of goals that he had. It seemed like every other weekend he was just giving us, another just a goal worthy of any type of recognition. Um, we can never forget him for everything that he did for us. He was one of the first players that he came close to Tomas's boys record of 104. So I think he got to 80. He got to 80 goal, 80 or 81 goals, somewhere
82,
around.
no?
Yeah, I think it's, if you count like other players. And I want to go back as well and retract myself. Him, Cookie, and Irenio, they do got a title, Interliga.
Mm.
Interliga. So yeah, so he's mentioning, Edgar's mentioning he had that goal last in Interliga as well. So yeah, I mean, nothing negative to say about El Chueco Divino Gaitan. He was also one of those players that you saw in the stadiums. Everybody had his jersey. Everybody had number 10 on. He was the first player that I saw women having number 10 Gaitan in the back of their shirts. He was just an amazing player, man. I mean, like Dennis said, I mean, if we could have seen him play with other teams from our uh, era of championships, I mean, what could have been? I posed this question to you guys in the past when we were discussing Lucas Lobos versus Gaitan, and we'll talk about it, further. But if you place him in Lucas's Lobos, team, yeah, I'm sure he would have killed it. He would have killed it. It would have been easy for him to play as well, But to me, Lucas Lobos gets the nod because he did give us the championship. He got us out of the hole.
Yeah. I recommend going to watch Walter Gaitan's top 10 goals on YouTube for Tigres. They're incredible.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a piece of art. Love that guy. The next fellow, an important player for this past decade, a captain, an assistant coach for Tuca, an assistant coach with Chima Ruiz, part of the historic line in the defense. Brazilian coming, with a low profile, coming from Asia, the Suwon team. And when he first arrived, the first thing that he, made himself distinct for was his free kicks, his security for kicking penalty kicks, and, just being a player who was just a leader, had a good anticipation, was able to read plays, just a really excellent player and what the club needed with the new era, started turning the corner in 2010. So Anselmo Juninho Bendepchowski. What do we have to say about him, fellas?
Never phased. Never ever phased. No moment was too big for him. Always in the right place at the right time. And just so much leadership. I mean, Ayala just talked about having a lot of leadership, but Juninho was the ultimate leader, the ultimate guy to command the team on and off the field, in the locker room. Represents us so well, like is such a good role model for our club and what we stand for, and obviously the titles to back that up too. Just so influential, and also had that dog in him, but in like a more subtle way.
2011 champ. 2011 champ, 2015 champ, 2016 champ, 2017 champ, 2019 champ. And I feel like
In
he
the
was not
2020 World Cup, he was already in a
assistant
coaching
coach.
position, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But he was there. He was part of it. He has the medal.
He counts.
Yep.
Yeah, he counts. I mean, Juninho, man. What can we say about Juninho? He's still a Tigre in the community. We see him week in, week out with Pello Maldonado. He's very invested in the team. He's had his couple of opportunities, and even when he obviously wasn't successful, along with Chima or with Tuca, um, I think he's going to stick around. He wants to be part of the institution. He wants to help our team accomplish more, and that's something that you don't get out of everybody, and that's what make these guys unique. That these are Tigres through and through. I mean, they're going to be Tigres for life, and it. They know it. They say it every time they come out and they get asked about it. I mean, Tigres is the love of their life, and so yeah, like Dennis said, I mean, he represents exactly who we want to represent us as a fan base, an idol, and also going back to what you were talking about, the offensive power that we had back in the day with Edu Vargas, with Ener Valencia, with Guignac, and how that's unmatched, or we think that it's unmatched in history. I think that back line, nobody will ever match that. I mean,
Agreed.
how can we ever, not, let alone Tigres, but how can anybody in the league, I mean, find a set of four players that just
Great
mesh
cohesion.
so well?
Yeah.
And 3 of the 4 of them being Mexican.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. The next player, another defender. This guy, was probably one of the first few idols for, an older generation of Tigres fans. Part of the, championship runs and, the first couple championships. Or, just a guy that also coached a team, a leader, Uruguayan, garra charrua, as they call it. Really interesting that he had a toupee. I didn't know that he had a toupee. They mentioned that in the docuseries. But historical player, Osvaldo Batocletti, a very lovable player by all the fan base, has, the coin phrase, al margen del resultado, pártense la madre, coach Tigres Femenil, and, very loved by some of those players that, got to be coached by him. So ultimately, a fantastic defender and a great leader in our early success that we had with the club. And so Osvaldo Batocletti is the next person on the list.
He's our definition of perfil tigre. He just is. He created that perfil tigre, and he left his legacy. Besides his titles and besides what he did at Tigres Femenil, his legacy will forever and always be that phrase that he left us. It's ingrained in our memory. It's ingrained in our history, in our culture. It's painted on all the walls in the stadium. I mean, what else can we say? Obviously, we have in social media. I'm not sure if it's his daughter or granddaughter, Gabi Batocletti.
Daughter.
Yeah, who's always present. I mean, how proud must they be? That their father's memory and their father's legacy will live on forever.
Forever.
I have a story. My mom, my sister, and I went to go see the team play a friendly in 2013 or 2014. It was at Houston. It was my first time at Shell Energy right when it opened up, and it was against Cruzeiro. And I remember pregame, we got there a little early, and I remember getting the chance to meet Batocletti, and just how warm that interaction was. Very friendly. Wanted to talk to us for a few minutes. There wasn't like a ton of fans around, if I remember correctly, but just like super enjoyable conversation. We took a picture with him and just full of joy. So I don't have much to add on like the player side because you guys, hit on it well and you guys have more memories of that. But just a great human being, and he's very well missed even still to this day. And I just really enjoyed that few minutes that I got to spend with him when I was like 13 years old. I'll never forget that.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that, Dennis. Looks like we got a comment here by Henry Ford. Wish he was still around and healthy. As good as a player he was, his influence and greater accomplishments were off the pitch. He modeled our youth players and feminine players greatly. Beautiful said. Next player. Also, in that painting that I just showed you guys, another one of my favorite players, and I'm sure some of you guys and a lot of the recent generation of fans that we accumulated over the years. Captain of the team, came when we made more carne asadas than the entire country of Mexico ever had, with all the coaches that we had, with Tolo Gallego, Manuel Lapuente, Jose Peckerman. But there was a player that always stood out, and just a great skill on the ball. Really, really skinny player, but that did not stop him from creating so many chances offensively. He pressed the ball. He was all over the place. He was always the guy that was most fouled in a Liga MX season. Every season he played, because there was the only way to stop him. You had to foul him. And Lucas Lobos means a ton to our history. Like I said, throughout the bad years, but got that, end of the 29-year drought with the championship in 2011. Number 16, Lucas Armando Lobos Mac.
Name my son after him.
Oof, nice.
That's how big. I mean, in the end, yeah, we will forever, remember for him being the leader. He's the one that carried our team from, like I said earlier, from the hole. We were literally in a hole, in a football analogy hole. We were about to hit rock bottom again, and luckily, we were saved thanks to, I think, Necaxa winning or tying or something.
Mm-hmm.
Not by our own merits, but Lucas Lobos was part of the team that was ultimately maybe the worst team of our generation. I mean, in Tigres, as far as just a whole bunch of players that did not care, to be here, a bunch of players that did not care whether or not, they were going to be with us next season. And Lucas Lobos was not that type of guy. He came and he realized that, with the fan base, that it meant a lot more to us than what it meant to some of his teammates. And to me, I believe that he really put on the shirt. He had the talent of Walter Gaitan, but the sacrifice of Javier Aquino, Irene Suarez, Danilino. I mean, the guy, like you said, he was fouled more than anybody in the league, during the time that he was here. So he's a very important player in our history. I love him. I wish that his exit wouldn't have been as ugly as it was. Like some of the other players had also ugly exits, but that does not, to me, that does not put a stain in his legacy at Tigres.
Box office. That's a guy you pay money to see specifically, more than any other guy. Before Gignac, that was the guy. He had the it factor. He had everything you could ever want: talent, quality, leadership, humility, sacrifice, willingness to fight for the badge. Everything you could ever want. And like you mentioned, wish his exit wasn't so ugly, but what a player.
What a player he was. And the fact that he had to play with Kikín Fonseca, Omar Bravo, Ariel Bogado, Alfredo González Tahuilán, Fernando Eltano, Coach P.E. Ortiz. It was just, Lucas Lobos deserves all the praise, and it'll never be enough. So shout out to him.
Can you imagine if he was on the 2015 to 2017 era? We probably win all 6 of those league titles, dude. Like,
yeah,
so influential.
You know what? I wish that there was a video for that we can find the Hector Mancilla farewell game where
He played with Gignac.
Gignac, Lucas Lobos, Walter, Damian Alvarez, all played on the same team.
Sheesh.
Anyways, moving on, fellas. Next guy on our list, and we got only 5 after this one. Really interesting how, I didn't, just looking at this graphic again, I didn't plan for this, but I feel like there's a, I didn't mean to, like I said, the specific order that we ended up playing, reading the players out and going back, it sort of works out really nicely because we got, Lucas Lobos here, and the next guy we got is Javier Aquino. Javier Aquino is a player that came as well to change the history of our club. Mexican player, started off as a right winger at Cruz Azul, went to Europe and, came back and was turned into a left winger by Tuca Ferretti. Really changed his game. And obviously, being with Damian Alvarez also contributed a lot to his development as a player. Was able to play eventually right back, left back. But if you ask me, he could probably play central defensive midfielder as well because the man is all over the pitch. And, he's been criticized as of late here and there, but he's having a good season so far. And like what he does on the field to mark and contribute offensively, there's not a player like him. A really important player as well for the national teams at times. He was part of the 2018 World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, with not Ricardo Osorio. Fuck, who am I thinking? The Colombian guy. What's his name? Rotations Osorio. What's his name?
Juan Carlos
Osorio. Javier Aquino, El Soldado, as Pello Maldonado coined him, is just, man, a lot of accolades with the club and continues to, build his stature with the club.
Talk about a guy who has evolved and aged so well. That's not what you would expect out of a guy who thrived on the wings, who came from Europe, who came at a big team. He played at Villarreal. That's a big team in Spain, who's had European success, who, isn't winning La Liga, but, they're up there in the top half, most of not all of the time. And for him to evolve from what he was in 2015 when he first joined with APG in the gang to what he is now, and how he's done it with so much grace and class and no complaints either. Just the pure quality and the willingness to work hard speaks volumes about him. And now that he's kind of, taken on this new role of being a defender and being willing to help on that end and being flexible and improving as the years have gone on recently, like on the defensive end of the ball, and influencing Chuy Garza, as we've, kind of seen in a documentary and through quotes and interactions recently. What a guy. Just really, really personifies team player.
Anything to add, Alfred, to Javier Aquino?
The only thing I would add is, like he's mentioned in several interviews, for a player that started in one of the, Liga MX Grandes, like Cruz Azul, just the fact that to him, now Tigres is a bigger part of him, even though Cruz Azul debuted him, to him, he is a Tigre. And he said it in several of his interviews, and like many of the other his peers in the same tier group, he's one of those players that he's going to be a Tigre forever, and that's really something to appreciate. Like I said, of somebody that they came from El DF, and that usually when they come out of those bigger clubs, they tend to prefer to stay over there. So. He's a very humble guy, and we're very glad that he's part of our team and part of our legacy.
100. Next tier list. What we got?
The all-time legends. That's it. These are all-time legends for our club.
And that starts off with a man who, probably one of the older generation's first idols. A Mexican player, a very talented player, a national team player, considered one of the best national team players. Um, El Jefe, Tomas Boy, a guy that held the record prior to Gignac having it, and just a guy that was incredibly talented. And from even the docu series, watching the connection that he had to the club and the great teammate that he was, and to the players that were on the squads, speaks highly of him. He had some success as a coach, more specifically with Morelia. Never really got the chance to coach Tigres. I think that again, one of those players that exited in an ugly way. But Tomas Boy is also part of that Perfil Tigre, a guy that loved the club as when he was a player, maybe not so much when he was a coach per se, but a guy that's always going to be remembered because he was such a great talent on the field. Number 10, El Jefe Tomas Boy.
So in his persona, in his TV persona, obviously that we know of him, older as a coach, he always came out and spoke negatively of Tigres. But from what I've heard from people is that deep down in his heart, he always loved Tigres, and obviously he had a certain hatred towards the institution or the organization, I guess you could say, but not the colors, not the fan base. Obviously he's despite all the ugliness, behind all that, to the fan base, to the older generations, he's one of the greats. He is one of the greats. I mean, obviously, having held that record for so long, I mean, nobody had matched it, had reached it. Walter Gaitan, Lucas Lobos, so many players had tried and could not reach his record. And just ultimately, I mean, he was a tigre. He had the garra, and he was el jefe. He was a guy that was in the field, fighting for his teammates. In the documentary, that they mentioned how he shaved his head, to make Batocleti feel better or secure about himself, about his alopecia, and that's, I mean, that speaks great of him. What a guy.
Yeah, Dennis, I know you were a little too young for this. I mean, we were all too young for him. I didn't get to watch him play, but my dad spoke really highly of him, and
My uncle has too. Yeah.
So shout out El Jefe, Tomas Boy,
En paz descanse.
en paz descanse, rest in peace. The next player on the list,
Capi.
El Capitán Guido Hernan Pizarro, a guy that came to the club in 2013 as a guy from Lanús who was supposed to be, or was more of an attacking player in the midfield, but Tuca turned him into defensive mid. And God, did he run the league, being one of the best defensive midfielders in the last decade. Turned now a center back, just recently won the Balón de Oro as a center back for Tigres during the last 2023 season. And, everybody loves the player, the leader that he is. He's a true professional. I mean, we heard about the story where he goes to celebrate with Nahuel in a private plane at the Copa America with Argentina, and then comes back and he's the first guy at practice the following morning after the celebrations. And, in the docuseries, just a guy that, everybody respects, loves, and is always, making sure that he's taking care of everybody in the locker room. And so multiple championships as well, 2015 championship, not the 2017 Final Regia because that's when he left to Sevilla, but 2019, 2020 Club World Cup, 2023 championship, scored the winning goal in extra time. El Capi de Oro, like Edgar's saying, Guido Pizarro. What do we have to add to this extreme great player?
Me? All right, I'll do it. So I don't know if there's any other player that we've had of that caliber that's been able to make the jump from Tigres to Europe to such a high profile team like Sevilla. And had he been luckier, he had the talent to stay and never come back. Luckily for us, he did come back. I mean, in the end, what a guy. I mean, he's been so influential in many of our championships. Like you said, just a leader through and through. La concha de tu madre to the Rayados. I mean, he just represents us, on and off the field. Um, very serious personality, very professional, and somebody that we know that wants us to succeed, wants us to get more championships. And I think that out of the rest of our club legends in this last like decade, I think that he might have a little bit longer time to stay. I mean, he's at the All-Star game. He was the only player that almost played the 90 minutes. What the heck? I mean, he's how is he still doing it? At his age. But I mean, there's nothing negative to say about Guido Pizarro.
Probably one of, if not the most intelligent player we've ever had. Just the way that he runs the show and commands respect and everything, whether it's as a number 6 or now as a center back. He is a coach on the field, as we've seen recently. Like, I don't know that I have really seen that up close in the games that we've been at together the last couple of years. Just the way that he's always barking at the players. And telling everybody calma, but that's what he does. He provides that leadership. He provides that like tactical awareness and like stability that not many other players could do that. And like you guys mentioned, like he easily could have stayed at Sevilla. Like this guy scored a goal in the Champions League, and was kind of perfect for that Sevilla team that's a little bit more defensive rounded and meant for like tournament games. And it just didn't work out. And like you guys mentioned, it worked out for us. And one of the coolest characters of our club too, just very nonchalant, like very like chill, but when he's on the field, like he means business and he's going to get the job done. And his influence, despite, his kind of more laid back personality, speaks volumes. I mean, we talked about it the other day during the All-Star game, like how highly the Apple guys were talking about him. I mean, obviously they were talking, big game about Gignac, but I was not expecting them to say so many good things about Pizarro during that game. They did, and that speaks to, even at his older age and even at a different position, still the quality of player that he is and the pedigree that he provides.
He was captain at the All-Star game for Liga MX, and he just recently won an accolade for best defensive player. I mean, even though he just started playing defense a couple years ago, like
crazy.
Yeah, just incredible. I mean, the accolades are there. He continues to build it, and I think it's well deserved where he's sitting or slotted in our list. Getting closer, guys, to finishing up. The next guy, another idol of the older generation of players. Number 7, the only retired number that we have in our club history. Tomás El Patrulla Barbadillo. Incredible winger. Jerónimo. Yeah, but I didn't know his middle name. Yeah, good call. Jerónimo. ¿Es La Patrulla or El Patrulla? What do they call him? ¿El o la?
It was El Patrulla. Jerónimo El Patrulla Barbadillo.
Okay, so he got sold to Italy. Was it Napoli? Not Napoli. Genoa. I need to double check that.
So I think you're right.
So Patrulla Barbadillo, excellent winger, provided excellent times and skills to the early championship years with Milok. Our first Bomba signing, a player that was ahead of his time, would be an automatic starter on today's squad. And so there you have it. Henry Ford adding to our pod at the moment and has been all night. So shout out to Henry Ford. Barbadillo, man, just an incredible player. Again, like I said, another guy of my dad's idols. Championships, like Henry Ford said, ahead of his time. So I'll move the mic over to you, Alfred.
61 goals, which back then, I mean, it was a lot. And the fact that he wasn't a striker, and he didn't last as many years at Tigres like Tomás Boy did. Tomás Boy was pretty much like 12, 13 years at Tigres or something like that. But in going back to my comment on Guido Pizarro, well, there there he is. He's the other guy that made the jump from Tigres to Europe, to a high profile team in Italy instead of Spain, but nonetheless. So back then, he was a starting player for Peru. He was in the World Cup. I mean, he was an elite world class player that we had. I don't know how he came, to our team. Okay, so he went to Avellino, then Udinese. Okay, so we have the answer from Edgar. Thank you, Edgar. But yeah, I mean, obviously everybody speaks great of him. Older generations, they nicknamed him El Patrulla because of some apparently some show back in the day about like cops chasing or something like that, and that's
Yeah,
what
because
he looked like.
they couldn't stop him, right? Like because
Yeah,
he was too fast.
yeah, yeah. So there you go. Oh, Copa America champion as well. There you go. So I mean, what a legend to have and to be part of our history.
Yeah, I wish we could say more about him, and as well as some of the older players that we didn't get to watch. But obviously, it's past our time. We weren't born yet, so we definitely appreciate the historic marks that they've had on the club and everything that they've done for us. So that's why they're on this list, even though we didn't get to watch them play. So we're not, downplaying that. We didn't. He's not up there, but we just don't have a lot to say about him coming out with sincerity. So El Patrulla Barbadillo makes that last list before we move on to the final list on our Cerro de la Silla historical players. Mosquan, he looked like Clarence Williams III. God, Henry Ford's on one tonight. As we come to the conclusion of the Cerro de la Silla historical players, it was fun, man. Alfred, shout out to your idea of creating this, this little interaction and content that we put out. It's going to be a long episode. So if, for those that are going to tune into it with the audio version only or watch the video, obviously may not dedicate the time that the people that we had, over 100 people that we had watching us live for the last close to 2 hours. Thank you guys for, sticking around. We're down to the last part of the graphic. What's the title of tiers called, Alfred?
These are the deities. I mean, they're above all-time legends. They're god tiers to our team, to our history, to our legacy. These two players are unequivocally the best players that we've ever had in our team, the most influential. We can't choose one or the other just yet. Who knows, at the end of their careers, that might change, and one might jump above, or one might jump below. But for now, for the time being, what they've given us places them at the very, very top of our Cerro de la Silla.
I feel like we can have like a two-way discussion here. We don't have to, separate the conversation here. And it's funny that you bring it up because in the sense of like, we don't know who's ahead yet, but that's the cool part about it for me. They're still competing internally against that. It may not be like, openly talked about, obviously, because they're great teammates, they're great friends, and they're the two most important positions on the field, one scoring the goals and one stopping the goals. And what they've both done to our championship runs have been incredible. And Gignac has obviously stated that Nahuel has been the most important in the championships. And you can argue that for sure. Maybe just more so on the impact on and off the field, and, the profile of the player that Gignac is. That's maybe where he has the edge over Nahuel. But, both incredible talents, and we're talking about Nahuel Guzman and André Pierre Gignac, just changed completely the history of our club in terms of the multiple championships that we accumulated. So we'll leave it at as an open thoughts in your head and everything that we can talk about. And now I just want to focus on maybe the most favorite memory that you guys have about both of them.
Dennis?
I think for Nahuel, it's really hard to pick between Libertadores goal and 2016 shootout against America.
You mean Conca Champions goal?
Yes, sorry, Conca Champions, not Libertadores. Yes. Golly, I mean, those are like two very crucial moments in our history. Oh my word. I'll say both of them. 1A, 1B, why not? Um Baton man, just a personality that is larger than life. Both of these guys give us like eyes that probably wouldn't usually watch us, or probably wouldn't like care about us. I'll talk about it with Gignac in a second, but Nahuel's, his adventures going out of the goal, his you know
Nahueleadas.
his yeah that like his Nahueladas, like in penalty shootouts, like his mind games, classic Argentine goalkeeper stuff. Last year at Leagues Cup, pulling out the thing out of his mouth, like the laser, like it just unreal, man, and just so lovable, so important in all of these championships. And then for Gignac, just the here's what I'll say about him, because we talk about him all the time. I think with him, his story of coming to Tigres is probably one of the more beautiful stories just in soccer. I think you can make that argument just because he leaves Europe when he's in a good spot. He had history of like having some, failed transfers to some Premier League teams. Like he was really close to joining Fulham. Ended up staying in France. Was big in Liga. Then he comes over, and 9.5 years later, he is the king of our city.
The king
Genuinely,
of the
like
north.
genuinely, like, and he loves Mexico, loves our country, loves Tigres. Obviously, the goals go without saying, and people around the world know about Tigres because of him. And Nahuel, there's some of that with him too, but Andre, just it's a different level because people in Europe know, people in France know. Um, I'm reminded of that looking at images last week of like his, interactions with Loris, and I'm hoping that one day we can get another LAFC game soon so that we could see him and Giroud, interact with each other and play against each other, because I know that they have a pretty good relationship, and his ability to bring in players from France. I mean, there's no Andy Delort without Gignac. There's no Florian Thauvin without Gignac. Just both of them, just so the gravity, the aura that they have goes beyond words.
Agree. Can't add much to it. I'll just, I'll put in my 2 cents on my favorite moments. And somebody commented on there, the whole 2019 championship, Nahuel. I mean, we wouldn't have been champions without Nahuel, that championship. But to me, my favorite moment, not the biggest moment, we could argue it was any of them, but to me, my favorite moment was the 2016 penalty kick shootout against America. In my memory, will forever be that shot. I don't know if it was Televisa shot or whose shot it was, but from the top of the stadium, of when Nahuel, he stops that third penalty kick, and the camera shakes because of the eruption of the fan base. The camera shakes. That to me, that is forever engraved in my memory, and is my favorite moment. And it's due to Nahuel, to his performance.
I want to piggyback off of that comment real quick, Alfred, and the nonchalant and the body language as he approaches that last third stop, and he mentions it in the docu-series that like it didn't matter where he went, the ball was going to follow him. But as you watch it from the angle, from above, the goal, and he just moves, and he's just like he's doing what, and then he just dives. Incredible, man. That's just incredible skill, incredible like presence, mind games, like just an intelligent player. And for a guy that gave us multiple championships, just I wanted to add to the body language and everything he did there. So sorry for interrupting you there.
No, no worries, man. I mean, you're adding on to my limited opinion, but in the end, Gignac, I mean, 211 goals and counting. He's 38. He's right now he's aiming at 40. But who knows, man? I mean, the guy's unstoppable. The guy, he's untrainable. I mean, like you can't train, you can't teach what Gignac has. You know, his mentality, his, you know, his desire to continue to be at his age relevant and to continue to grow and to continue to score goals. I mean, you can't teach that. How many players are, you know, barely, you know, hitting it off, and I'm talking about Liga MX here, but you know, barely hitting it off at 26, 27 years old, and they're already, you know, kind of like, you know, way over their head. And this guy, I mean, he's had it all, he's won it all. Why does he want more? Why? Like, how, where do you get the drive for that? That's something that, you know, to me is unmatched. And just the fact that he's a Tigre, and that he wants this for Tigres. You know, he wants to get another championship with Tigres, and just like when he, you know, when he wanted that pinche Copa, the Conca Champions, you know, he wanted it for Tigres, not because of what the Copa meant, you know, but he just, I mean, when, like Dennis said, I mean, it's a perfect story. When are we ever gonna have a player like that come to our team again and just fall in love with our team in that same way? I don't think it'll ever be possible. I don't think anybody could ever, you know, fall in love like he did.
Yep.
Well, and here's the other thing too. It's a story that other teams in our league have tried to replicate with big name players, and nobody has ever been close. Nobody has ever been close to what Gignac has done, ever, and it won't ever be topped, I don't think. This is not my most favorite moment of Gignac, but I'll just say it because I think it's a little bit underrated. The stretch of bubble in Orlando to Club World Cup, where he just kind of turned into the dominator, the Terminator of all the teams that we faced, in that 3-game stretch in Orlando, and then obviously, you know, the way that he showed up in Qatar. He literally carried the team on his back, literally. And obviously, you know, wish he could have done more against Bayern Munich, but I don't feel like that gets talked about enough compared to like the Puskas goal and his first goal against Inter in Libertadores, which was unreal, and some of these other crazy moments that he's had with us. And that was a stretch where he knew the importance of the moment, not just for him, but for the club, and that maybe this might be one of the last chances, because we had at that point so many failures in Conca Champions. Like, we made like 3 or 4 of the finals and hadn't won any of them, surprisingly. And he knew that it was time to strap in and finally get over the line. And then obviously icing on the cake in those 3 games in Qatar.
To me, my favorite moment of Gignac is just those goals against Rayados, where, you know, he finally, you know, and I'm not trying to give any props to Rayados or anything with this, but you know, he represented us, and he provided the ultimate vengeance with his celebration, lying down on the field. So that to me is my favorite moment of Gignac.
Yeah, and we can go on forever talking about these two. Their story continues. It's never going to be matched, and I think now it's a friendly inner competition, and more so for the fan base, obviously not for them, as to who's going to make it to the top of El Cerro de la Silla of historical players in our hearts, in our head. So 32 players that we talked about today. A little bit over 2 hours talking about it. Funny that I thought this was going to be a 30-minute pod. But here we are. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We won't take much of it. Tomorrow, Tigres takes on Puebla to start off the Leagues Cup. We'll be there at the game. Hopefully, you can see us there if you are from the Houston area or you're coming in. And that way we can get some content with you, get your thoughts on the game, not the Summer Cup, but the Leagues Cup. If you're coming from out of town, we'd love to get your story in a quick video, and maybe even a picture with you guys. And thank you for following our content. We got more special content the rest of the week, so make sure you follow our accounts and stay tuned for more releases.
Couple things. Shout out everybody who watched and commented on the live stream. And also, if you're listening on audio specifically, if you're on Spotify, this is a new feature they just rolled out on Spotify. You can comment within the episodes of any podcast. So if you have something to say as you're listening on Spotify, drop it in the comments, just like a YouTube video, and we'll read them.
Yeah, especially because I know not everybody's going to agree with the list that we created. I'm sure that some people think other players should have been or higher on the list, lower on the list, players that we didn't include. So, yeah, feel free. Thank you, fellas, for coming on and recording.
This was great. Thank you, guys.
Ciao.